Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Sara Gon. Sara, how are you doing?
Hi, no, well, and you, Nick, thanks.
Cold, but otherwise good. And also Mr. Marius Roodt. Marius, how are you doing? Oh, I think we've lost Marius there. Anyway, while we wait for him to get back, let me just give you a quick word from our sponsor today. And our sponsor is Bitvice. And Bitvice is concerned about the poor performance of the South African Rand and local investment returns when planning for your retirement? Look no further than bitvice.io, the reputable white glove Bitcoin service designed to provide you with a secure and professional approach to navigating the world of Bitcoin. With a proven track record, Bitcoin offers potential growth opportunities amidst economic uncertainties. At bitvice.io, we prioritize your security, empower you with self-custody, ensuring complete control and protection of your Bitcoin holdings. Discover the benefits of self-custody and secure your financial future with bitvice.io. Visit our website today, and there will be a link to them in the description. Marius, are you back with us?
Yes.
Wonderful. And we've got Mr. Marius Roodt here. Okay, let us get into the news of today. And this one has been bubbling away for a while, but it seems to be getting worse. And that is a cholera outbreak in Hammanskraal in northern Gauteng. At least 95 people have shown symptoms at hospitals of being infected with cholera in Hammanskraal. And 10 people have died and 37 have been admitted to hospital in a critical condition. So it's pretty awful stuff. The victims do include, unfortunately, a 3-year-old child, which is not unusual for a disease like cholera. And the city of Tshwane has issued a warning to its residents in Hammanskraal and surrounding areas not to drink water from their taps, saying that water tankers were being supplied. But at the same time, there is some worries that some of the water tankers may have created a problem. There was a report that the city says that the municipality was investigating the source of the outbreak, which could come from water in fire hydrants that we use to fill the water tankers, water perhaps being contaminated in the tankers, or water contamination in the buckets that people use to collect water from the tankers. So that's very concerning if the things they're bringing in to try and help with the problem of the water, which has been bad in Hammanskraal for a while, are actually causing people to get sick. Outer issued a statement on this, saying that they've been saying that the city of Tshwane should repair the Rooival for wastewater treatment works for a while, and rehabilitate the Arpies River in order to prevent something like this happening, but says that the city has failed in its duty. Now, this is an ongoing problem. I think that Hammanskraal's water situation has been deteriorating for a long time, but this has fallen under both ANC and opposition administrations. Sara, what do you make of this story? I mean, we haven't had bad cholera in South Africa for quite a long time. This is, I think, quite a serious and terrible indictment of the state of our infrastructure.
Yeah, well, it's probably, if you want to say, give me an example of the failure of the state, this type of event would be that. It happens periodically. It's every few years, but the extent of it and clearly the seriousness when you've got 10 people already dying of the disease, it goes to the fact that so much of our infrastructure is in disarray, and this is what happens when you're dealing with infrastructure. You don't deal with it. You don't clean the water. You don't create the new sewage facility, and people die. And I don't know if this is, if this would help get the government's attention to actually do something about the problem. I mean, I realize Hammanskraal's it's a wide area. It's a large. It's a large township, and there's be a lot to feed. And I'm sure there are a lot of problems in the water circulation generally. But this is the sort of thing that is, if it happens, it just looks so bad for the government because the results can be so dire. And if it's contaminated in the water tankers, well, that's beyond it comment, because if what's supposed to help you is actually causing the problem, God help us. I'm not sure about the idea about it being in their buckets, because unless they were all using the same bucket, It doesn't matter. I think it's a way to try and deflect a bit of blame.
Marius, what do you make of this story? I mean, I think you were saying before the show that this is kind of the worst of state failure, right? That when people are dying directly.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, people have literally died because the state's failing. And, I mean, you shouldn't laugh, but I mean, I was just looking now where in the 2020s where there have been outbreaks of cholera. And in places that are very poor, very undeveloped places, I mean, looking now, there've been, so just in the 2020s, since 2020, there have been outbreaks in Niger, Cameroon, Nigeria, the DRC, Malawi, in Ukraine in Mariupol during the current Russian war there, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Yemen, Haiti. So so it's not a list of very well developed places that are run well. It's places that are run poorly, and I mean, also, I mean, it's a place where there's literally having a war. In the case of Ukraine, I'm sure there probably wouldn't have been a cholera outbreak there if they hadn't been invaded
and Yemen
by Russia
as well.
Yeah, in Yemen, yeah. But I mean, Yemen's always been a pretty poor place. But anyway, that's besides the point. But I mean, it just shows you cholera outbreaks don't happen in well-run places. I mean, it's, cholera, in a place that's run properly, you won't get a cholera outbreak. But we're seeing it happen now. And as I say, I mean, it's state failure has now literally led to the deaths of people. I mean, not state officials not doing their jobs properly they've got blood in their hands, to be honest.
And I can immediately see the sort of problems that are going to develop from this. So the city is responsible for some of the infrastructure, but some of the water is also provided by the kind of provincial and national larger organizations like Rand Water and that. And as has happened, I know, in water problems with Joburg, and I suspect it's going to happen here, there's going to be miscommunication and finger pointing and blaming between the two different spheres of government, which certainly doesn't inspire one with confidence that the situation is going to be fixed anytime soon. Sara, any final thoughts on this before we move on?
Yeah, no, I mean, those countries you named are really at the bottom of the developmental pile. So to be, suffering from the same sort of disease that they do is absolutely foul. I mean, one of the audience members talks about Isidimeni. We can't begin to actually look at the amount of incompetence and carelessness that has led to the death of people. I mean, the claims against the hospitals in Gauteng are, well, the last time I looked, okay, it was admittedly about a year ago, is about 23% of the health budget. So the terrible thing about all of these things is they were avoidable or preventable. Much cheaper.
Right. And exactly. And you can trace ideological and policy roots to every single one of these, right? Every time this happens, it's because you had people put into places of power because of political connection, suppliers may be chosen because of race, who then didn't do the job because they were politically connected. And the result is not just, oh, the country didn't grow, oh, we stayed poor, whatever. People have died. And that is exactly why we need to change those policies.
Just on the point of ideology, I agree with you 100%. But there's a moral issue. I'm sure there'd be even hardcore communists who would want somebody like Kidani Mahlangu fired and never work in government ever again, because she's the person who was responsible for Life Isidimeni. And I don't know how many people died. I think 150 people died. And she was at the end of the day, she was the one responsible for it. Nobody's lost their job over it. Nobody's been fired. Same as when Collins Causa was killed. He was murdered by the security forces. Nobody cares. And in a proper country, nobody even even a hardcore communist will say, well, actually, somebody got murdered, by the state because of what the state did wrong, and somebody needs to at least lose their job. And it doesn't happen in this country. The government's actions literally lead to people dying, and nothing happens. As somebody says in the comments, there, hashtag no accountability. Exactly.
Right, and that is going to be, if South Africa wants to get right, is we need to, frankly, be more angry about these things, and as much as we can, hold government to account where we can, through the courts, through the ballot box, through whatever means necessary, really, by using civil society. Okay, let's move on to our next story, and this one made me chuckle because of how sort of amusingly predictable it was. And this is a report from the State Security Agency, the SSA, that says that government is, and particularly the SSA, is very concerned in the wake of what happened at Eskom about the activities of private investigations and what they called sort of these rogue intelligence gathering operations. The Minister for the Presidency responsible for state security said that as part of the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill, they needed to tighten up the regulations on what former members of the State Security Agency could do in their private capacity. What he said, whether you like it or not, we've got what we call external capacity. You've got someone who works for the State Security Agency, and for whatever reason they leave, and they've got this expertise and information, and they go and set up their own thing. So what we're doing with the new law is to say how to regulate that and to propose a regulatory mechanism. The State Security Agency says they were very upset that they didn't get to vet the private investigation that Andre de Ruyter launched, and that they would and that de Ruyter's actions were potentially illegal because they had created this rogue operation in investigating Eskom without State Security Agency approval. Marius, what do you make of this?
So, I mean, we really live in this country. Every time you open the news, it's a clown show. You know, it's something more and more ridiculous. And maybe if, I mean, I'm not sure about other law. Maybe, say Andre de Ruyter did possibly, maybe he was breaking the law by going to private organizations instead of going to the State Security Agency. But it's, I mean, I think very few people would think that the South African State Security Agency is not going to be involved in factional ANC battles. I mean, it's been involved in factional ANC battles since at least the 2000s, if not before that. So
it was connected as being one of the hearts of the whole state capture thing.
Exactly. Even before that, Thabo Mbeki was using the state security agencies to find dirt on Jacob Zuma. He obviously didn't do a very good job. But apart from that, whatever you think about Jacob Zuma, Thabo Mbeki shouldn't have been using state resources to try, get dirt at him because of an internal ANC battle. So, I mean, I don't think anybody could blame Andre de Ruyter. I mean, I don't think anybody really thinks that the state security agencies would be trying to do what's best for the country instead of what's best for certain ANC faction. But also, I mean, anybody can look at this and see it's pretty clear that this is happening because these things are coming out saying, yes, half the ANC is basically a mafia organization, so and also just a way of being gatekeepers and saying who can actually go investigate wrongdoing in South Africa and who can't. So, and also, again, it's just how the government's cosplaying at these things. They're going to bring in all these regulations. People are probably just going to ignore them anyway. Nobody's really going to take much note of it. And it's so obvious why the government is trying to do these things. It's actually ridiculous.
As we all know, intelligence gathering operations always follow the law entirely, exactly to the letter, and are not clandestine at all. So they're very easy to regulate. It's just, Sara, this is just so sort of hysterically silly because a intelligence report done by a private operative paints the government in a really bad light. Now, a responsible sort of democratically minded government would say, look, there was this media report which suggested that this intelligence gathering operation was actually full of nonsense, and therefore we're vindicated, and this just proves that you shouldn't just trust anyone that you meet on the street. But no, that's not enough. They have to go and clamp down on the thing. And quite frankly, if anything, this gives it more credibility. Then I think it's the Andre de Ruyter investigation. If suddenly the government is so concerned with regulating this stuff, I don't know, Sara, what do you make of this?
I think this is for the audience of ministers that is currently under scrutiny over electricity in general. Because, I mean, if I remember correctly, George Fivers, it's his company. He was a commissioner of police in the first government of the democratic era. So, of course, what do? You people go into areas that they've been in, that they know. Now, certainly the security services can when they sign someone on, they can do like most companies do at the higher levels. You impose a restraint, and provided the restraint is reasonable in terms of time and place, and it's all looked at with regard to the specifics of the case in point. Usually somebody will be prevented from going into some sort of competition for a year or two, and then they can act. Also agreements, employment contracts usually have a clause about not being able to, to expose company secrets to the public, or words to that effect. Well, certainly you can do that with this. Good luck to you in this field. You'd be able to prevent someone. But more than that, I don't know where the security agencies. It's just not going to. It's just not going to argue. A valid, legitimate company does it. If they have a gripe at all, and whether it's justified or not depends on the circumstances, and the circumstances appear to be that no one was doing anything about the request to look into this stuff. It's about the fact that he didn't get prior authority from the overlords in the government or the SSA. But, that's not the basis for overseeing an entire industry.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's just for immediate consumption.
We actually, if the government thinks these rogue agencies are out there putting rogue companies or rogue operatives out there putting their name into disrepute, we have defamation laws and things like that. And the ANC's already said that it's going to be using those to target the rater and the writers of this report. So I think that this is just, once again, the sort of, you can see the ideological tendrils all over this, right? Which is that, no, we need to regulate and centralize and control everything. There can not be a single center of power outside of the state and the ANC.
I think normally I would have agreed with you. But I think this is just sleazier than that. I think it doesn't go to ideology sort of tacked on afterwards. It was, what are we going to do about the fact that a private security agency dug up all this dirt and we knew nothing about it and we did nothing about it? But, that's not the issue. The issue is the private sector did the job. As I say, I think it's largely a sort of chest thumping.
Indeed. Marius, any final thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, Basari. It's chest thumping. Just trying to, show who's boss and throw some weight around. And it's not, you've got to laugh, otherwise you'll cry, I suppose.
All right, let's move on to our next story. And this one is a bit weird. So a man has been arrested, and we don't have a huge amount of detail on this, so I think that will change the discussion a little bit. But anyway, a 34-year-old man has been arrested for posting on social media pornographic images where he had overlaid the faces of Cyril Ramaphosa and Bheki Cele over these pornographic images. So he's being taken to court for allegedly contravening the Cybercrimes Act. These images were distributed to police officers and members of the public on social media platforms. A 34-year-old suspect was traced and arrested in Pietermaritzburg, and his device that was allegedly used, as well as SIM cards, were recovered in his possession. He was arrested by and this is the really not great part, members of the Gauteng Crimes Against the State team and the Hawks Pietermaritzburg-based Serious Organized Crime Investigation team on Sunday. Marius, this seems like a little bit of an overreaction. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so like we were talking before the show, the Cybercrimes Act does have kind of things that prevent you from doing this, but it's for good reasons, like stop people doing revenge porn. And if you have a bad breakup and you took a photo of your girlfriend's face and put it on a naked porn star or whatever, and send it to a family or something, that's obviously not really on, and you should probably get in trouble for that. But obviously this isn't somebody doing some revenge porn. I don't think this is a jilted lover of either Cyril Ramaphosa or Bheki Cele. It's obviously just a guy who's stuffing around on his computer and thought it would be funny to do this kind of thing. And you can think as maybe it's a bit crass and maybe a bit offsides, which is fine. But it shouldn't be something with the Hawks, the organized crime department, and the crimes against the state should be getting involved in. It's one of these things. I think it's a waste of state resources to get involved in this, and it's ridiculous. And the state should not be getting involved in this kind of thing. They wouldn't be getting involved. Organized crime units wouldn't be involved if this had been done to any other individual. So it doesn't really make sense that just because Bheki Cele and Cyril Ramaphosa they're getting involved. So while I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I think it's definitely something to be concerned about. We don't know what other kind of laws that the government could possibly use to kind of crack down on, dissent and so on. I mean, but to the ANC's credit, they've been pretty. I mean, they've never really tried to use the law to kind of stop people criticizing it. But this is something I think we definitely need to keep an eye on. And if it carries on like this, something it is a bit concerning, I think.
Yeah, no. So I think the devil will be in the details with a case like this. But my hackles definitely get raised from a kind of free speech perspective, which is, you can get banned off of social media platforms and such, maybe for posting pornographic stuff. But this sounds like it could have been some sort of political expression. And when it comes to free speech, political expression is usually the thing that is, that free speech is actually there to most importantly protect, right? So that the state can't enforce uniformity of how people talk about politics. Based on the fact that we don't know that much about this case, what's your take on this?
Well, as the director of the Free Speech Union of South Africa, I can only endorse exactly what you've said. I mean, it's context, guys. It's context. It's also the quality that we don't know. I mean, I would assume that if they're pornographic images, that the bodies of the guys are sort of buff and slim and 25. That should tell you immediately, that you're not exactly
that it's not Becky Cele.
or sort of, and it does, however, prove, as to sort of go along with one of the comments, that we suffer. This government is an obscenity of sorts, and they're just applying it in paper like we're saying it now in words. It's content. I would rather see those illustrious crimes against the state people. Never heard of it. It's really creepy, and the other guys go up to Mpumalanga and deal with the mafiosi that are destroying the power stations. That should have more. This guy's only, oh Jesus, only himself. I mean, at least, and a few people on the internet. I mean, come on, don't look. It makes them look stupid when they blow something up like this.
No, exactly, and I think that's kind of one of the aspects to this is how it really, once again, it's a little bit like the last story, right? It reveals the government's real preferences, which is threats to its power, things that embarrass its image. That needs to be stamped on immediately. That we move at the speed of light to deal with. But people dying of cholera in Hammanskraal, whatever, it's the city's fault. Blah 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 blah. Marius, any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, just to expand on what I was saying earlier, while I mean, the government hasn't, in general, the ANC hasn't, kind of clamped down on political expression. There have been times that they have. I'm just starting to think about Jacob Zuma and the famous spear painting, where there was painting with Jacob Zuma was, I think, from a kind of looking at a painting that had been done of Lenin, and Zuma was in the same pose, but with his genitals hanging out in the painting. And I remember there was quite a lot of, the ANC got quite annoyed, I think it was at the Goodman Gallery in Joburg, on Jan Smuts, and I think there was a march to the gallery. And I remember also there was I think it was a cartoon done by EWN, by Dr. Jack and Curtis, I think, where they implied that ANC voters were clowns. And I remember there's also a march by ANC on the offices, and there's all horribly racist, and how can people depict the ANC voters as clowns and all this kind of thing. So while it doesn't happen often, there is definitely a very illiberal streak, I think, within some in the government, and it's definitely something to think about. And also, and just on the case of the pictures that are being used with Cyril Ramaphosa and Becky Cele, I mean, were they even the same? Were the people's bodies the same race as Becky Cele and Cyril Ramaphosa? Would it be like obvious to any observer that it's a Photoshop picture if Cyril Ramaphosa then is on a white person's body or something like that? So that is also, it's quite ridiculous. But I mean, until we see these pictures, which I actually have no desire to see, it is all just a lot of speculation, I think.
I see some of the reporting does say that Cele's wife apparently also had her face plastered on one of these. So maybe this was some sort of attempt to, I don't know, create some sort of fake news scandal thing. But either way, this is the part I think that kind of gives away like the sort of ridiculousness of this whole case, is that the police spokesperson said, quote, "A multitude of pornographic images were allegedly found on his device." So It's not illegal.
Exactly. As long as
It
it's all
doesn't
normal
say-
stuff, then it's
Yeah,
fine.
it doesn't
As long
say
as
of.
it's-
It doesn't say
yeah.
of minors. It doesn't say of
Yeah.
something weird. No,
Animals.
it just okay. Well, anyway, we'll watch this story with interest because I think this could prove to be something pretty bad. Anyway, let's move on to some comments made by Tulas and Tracy. So, of course, I think it was about almost 2 weeks now. Tulas and Tracy went on a sort of slightly unhinged, racially tinged rant where he said that the government had been, quote unquote, too nice to you with regards to how aggressively it was implementing things like transformation targets and land reform, and that the country enjoyed all of the fruits of democracy simply because it was of the ANC's goodwill and largesse, and that really could take that all away from us if it felt the revolutionary need to. I mean, that was implied. He didn't say that directly. But anyway, Tulas and Tracy was answering questions before the National Council of Provinces, where he was asked by some DA members of the National Council of Provinces why it was that the Western Cape had a lower unemployment rate than the rest of the country. I think the Western Cape's unemployment rate is something like at least 7% lower than the rest of the country. I can't remember the exact number, but it's in the mid-20s rather than the 30s and higher. And Tulas and Tracy responded to this by saying that it was due to structural inequities and advantages created for the Western Cape by the apartheid system, as well as geographic features. Sara, what do you make of this?
This is the man who really wants to double down on racializing the workplace with the new Amendment Act. Sorry, the Employment Equity Amendment Act, and it's a sight to behold, particularly the regulations, which are absolutely wondrous. But there's always been that racial element from him. It comes out every now and again. He is a communist. He's a very loyal communist. He knows nothing about how businesses are run and the problems that they face and the issues they have to deal with. And I mean, I made a remark in an article because they were going after the banks, some of the big banks, for the fact that there weren't enough Black women in senior management positions. And I surmised that if their employment equity program wasn't a problem at all other levels, surely it suggested something other than a racist intent on the part of the bank. I just think it's a combination of ideology mixed with revenge, mixed with I'm a minister and I can tell you why it's where to get off, because that's what the insult was aimed at. And we've talked about this internally, and I really believe that this, obviously it should have happened years ago, but it is time for the business sector to say enough is enough. We can't have this. And I mean, Tulas Ndesi can't control his temper. It comes out, and it comes out racially, and he's not fit to be. Well, he's not fit to be a minister. He's one of the many ministers who are not fit to be a minister. And I mean, of course, the issues come up again, and they don't pay any heed to it, and that is that foreign companies see employment equity and Black, forced Black ownership of companies as the key reason for not investing in this country, and he's the architect.
Yeah, Marius, to me, this just speaks of how the government is, because there's a policy difference, obviously, between what goes on the Western Cape and the rest of the country. And the government just has no good answer to it. Geographic features, I mean, sure, they've got a tourism industry and stuff, but that has, don't tell me that that's the source of all of the jobs, because we recently had that decimated by the COVID lockdowns and the drop in international travelers. We've seen consistently in the unemployment reports recently that the Western Cape is adding, I think, most jobs of any other province. I think that's been the case for at least the last 2 quarters, but I speak under correction. And the government just has no way to explain this except the tired old horse of, well, you see, there was some sort of structural thing that we're not going to exactly point to here specifically. We're just going to kind of reference it, and then it's to do with the past. And actually, no, it's not our fault at all. We make this.
I mean, you can just see from DA politicians in the Western Cape compared to politicians in the rest of the country, people like Jordan L. Lewis and Alan Winde, you can see they're thinking of ways to encourage investment, cut red tape, and so on. I mean, Jordan L. Lewis was just launched a document about how Cape Town's going to make it easier for people to start businesses and all kinds of things. But just on the issue of Tulos and Gesi, I know during somebody who asked the Daily Friend, Jonathan Katzenellenbogen, said when vegetables started running out in the Soviet Union, they appointed a minister of vegetables. So we've got a minister of electricity now. And now we've also, and Tulos and Gesi is a minister of employment. So make of that what you will.
Yeah,
well, employment has not been his métier. I don't think he's had any success in that score.
Minister of unemployment. Perhaps in terms of sheer human suffering, his portfolio has been the greatest disaster for the country. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you very much for watching. We hope that you found the show interesting, and we will be back tomorrow with the Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone.